What's up, ladies and gentlemen? You are listening to Campfire Catholicism. I am your host, Elton Jarvis, and happy Easter to all of you here listening in. I was thinking of releasing this episode on Easter Sunday, early Easter morning Sunday, say that 10 times fast. However, Easter is not just one day, it is a season, and so I decided why not release it here on Easter Monday. So there you go, Easter Monday, this episode is out. I suppose it was providential to have it release on this day, and I'm going to, tell you guys very briefly why that is the case. Now, I don't know how many of you guys here are familiar with the TV series, but I was watching the second season premiere of The Chosen. It was being live streamed on YouTube. If anybody doesn't know what The Chosen is, I'll just give you a brief description. The Chosen is a multi-seasonal series that depicts the life of Jesus and his disciples as he was alive on this world 2,000 years ago. And what is so good about the story is it is in history, and we believe it to be true. So I've watched all of the first season, and overall, I believe it is such a good artistic rendition of our blessed Lord and the life of the disciples. Now, there are bits and pieces of director narrative, I guess that would be the technical term that you would call it, that is inserted into the film, but it's not so much, and it's not so deep that it's heretical or anything. Anyways, any of you Catholics that are listening in that haven't watched The Chosen, please watch The Chosen. So, because I'm going to dedicate this podcast episode, which is going to be titled Easter Special. I guess Easter Week Special. I don't know. I haven't thought of a title for it yet. But this is an Easter Special podcast episode. And I'm going to dedicate it into breaking down the very first episode of the second season. And at least why I am raving about this episode right now. I couldn't stop talking about it as soon as I watched it. Again, I'm going to suggest, for those of you that have not seen The Chosen, I do strongly suggest that you look it up and watch it in its entirety. They do have the full first season, and you can watch it. Be sure to get the app and support them by paying it forward. I'm not getting paid to be promoting this. I'm obviously just saying it, but get the app and pay it forward, because that's how they that's how they fund their TV show. It's not really out of their own pocket. So I do strongly suggest that you watch all of the first season, but I am not going to force you guys to do so, because again, I don't have the power to do so, and I really shouldn't be using that power to be forcing you guys to watch anything anyways. But just know that throughout this whole episode, there are going to be spoilers, so be warned. Anyways, let's get to the description of the episode. In the first scene of Season 2, Episode 1 of The Chosen, we get to see basically a face shot of the apostles, Peter, Andrew, James, Jude, Matthew, Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of Jesus. I could be missing somebody. Those are the people that I did see. And they're giving their testimony to an unknown individual on the life of Christ. And they look older, and they also seem incredibly touched in describing their testimony. And two things come to mind right away. Number one, the scene is taking place after Christ's resurrection and ascension. The second thing that I thought about is just who exactly are they speaking to? As I was watching the scene, the first person I thought of was St. Paul, as he is investigating the eyewitnesses of Jesus to see if Christianity really is true, because St. Paul actually does do this. He visits, off the top of my head, the ones that are documented right away are, he visits Peter and I believe it was James. But he visits them, and he tries to get eyewitness testimony out of them because he is investigating whether Christianity is true or not. Anyways, during the scene where this individual is talking to Matthew and how Matthew gives an accurate and precise description on his testimony, this person replies to Matthew that it doesn't have to be precise, and he responds with, "Mine will be precise," which then is in reference to the gospel. And so that left me with, this is either Luke or John. at this point, this unknown individual. So not unknown, unknown. There we go. This unknown individual. And then we get the scene where Mary, the mother of God, says about her testimony will not make much sense. And then he replies, "Try me, mother." And as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, this is John. This has to be John the Apostle. And yeah, sure enough, it is. And he is gathering eyewitness testimony. And Mary mentions that he needs to mourn his brother, which he ends up replying to her, "He won't be the last of us that happens. He won't be the last of us that this happens to. Who knows when I will see the others or if." And I want to focus on this a little bit because it is common for people to believe that our faith is made up of fairy tale and that it's not, and that it's just one big hoax that the disciples conjured up for happy times. And certainly that is a possibility, and I would believe it if all but one of the apostles didn't end up martyred for their faith in Jesus. All of the apostles. St. Peter, St. Andrew, St. James, St. Matthew, all of the apostles except one was martyred. That one, obviously, that didn't was St. John. In order for it to be a lie, they would have had to gain something. If that is true, then why lie yourself to the point of death? The apostles died for something they truly believed in. Therefore, it doesn't fit the motive of an individual who lies. Anyways, just thought I would share that out there now. Back in the scene, Mary and John are talking about the beginning of the gospel and how it should be written. And he mentions that he wants to communicate that God is much more than to be seen and to be touched. And that makes sense because God is immaterial and he is spirit. He mentions, "In the beginning, the earth was formless and void." And as soon as he says that, they both look out the window and it cuts to lightning flashing and there's thunder and there's a whole bunch of rainfall. There's a thunderstorm outside. I want you guys to remember that part of this scene, this little clip of the thunder and lightning. It's going to be important. So pay attention to this. Put that in your memory. Mary then leaves John to continue thinking about how he should write the beginning of his gospel. And now we get the beginning credits of the episode. After the beginning credits, we get to see James and John during the present moment, which the present moment is all of the, because the episode and all of the episodes take place around Jesus's life. And so we see, I guess I'm going to call them present James and present John. Well, present John. So what you just listened before, that was future John, right? This is present John. Okay, so we get to see James and John during the present moment. And they are plowing a field, which the reason why they're plowing a field is because Jesus ordered them to do so. And this episode really does revolve around them. Really, it revolves around John specifically, but James is also, he has a little bit of a major role in this part. Unfortunately, I can't get into every single detail into this episode, so if you want more, or if you are unsure of what I'm speaking about, then be sure to check out the episode of The Chosen. All throughout this episode, we can see the passion of both of the brothers, yet also their intolerance and even pride. They mention how they are liked the best by Jesus, and they are quick to discuss about not liking the Samaritans. Racism is actually mentioned quite a bit in this episode, both implicitly and explicitly, as we know that the Jews and the Samaritans historically, they didn't like each other one bit, and we're going to talk more on that later. Jesus in this episode, he revolves around helping the Samaritans and teaching them. And the one parable that he focuses on is the parable of the lost sheep, and how God will always go after the one who is astray, and how there is more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than 99 others that do not need repentance. We fast forward, and it is revealed that the field that James and John were plowing were for a Samaritan, and he has a broken leg. So it was for him and the rest of his family as well, his wife and I believe, his little daughter. This Samaritan welcomes Jesus and the disciples into his home to eat, although he does so very reluctantly. And him inviting Jesus and the disciples into his home, that represents a growing intimacy, because it is intimate to share food and drink with an individual. And so it is as if he is accepting Jesus, or he's starting to accept Jesus into his inner heart by accepting them to eat with him. And so we see them, they're sitting around a fire sharing stories. Peter and Andrew are telling a story that they end up, and in the story they kind of end up bashing John and James. Like, I don't want to say it's sarcasm, but they're definitely, well, they're joking about them. They're joking about James and John. And as they're doing this, I was just recognizing the way that scene was shot and where each person was. Peter and Andrew are sitting closest to the fire, along with the Samaritan family and Jesus, while James and John are in the background, standing in the dark. There's a physical manifestation of what is happening in the interior hearts of James and John, and it's manifesting itself physically in them standing in the dark. It's just something that I noticed. Now, the wife of this Samaritan man asks Jesus when he will get rid of suffering, if he is the Messiah. And he replies that he is here to preach the good news of heaven, a kingdom not of this world, but of the next world. In this world, bones and hearts will still break. But in the end, the light will not overcome the darkness. This is the other key moment. He mentions that the light will overcome the darkness. The darkness will be overcome by the light. That is what I'm implying. There we go. A little bit of a correction. So that's what I want you guys to remember. He says, in the end, the light will overcome the darkness. Now, this is so beautiful, because as he is saying this, because he is saying it around the campfire, a campfire also bears and emits light. And Jesus, as we know, is the light of the world. There's so much symbolism in that little scene. Jesus ends up asking this Samaritan man about his broken leg, and for the Samaritan man to tell him his story. And we get a beautiful scene of him sharing about how it was. The reason why he has this broken leg is because he beated a man who was a Jew to near death off to the side of the road, stole his horse, and fell off of it, ending up breaking his leg in the process. He fears that this man he did end up killing, like he ended up killing him, and he is responsible. And Jesus says that, I know and I promise you that the man is not dead. You didn't kill this man. This man is not dead. Somebody came and helped him. I love that. That allures to the parable of the Good Samaritan. In general, this scene also is representing the sacrament of reconciliation. This man is confessing his sins to Jesus, which he then asks, why did you come out to help me here? And if you remember what Jesus was talking about earlier, Jesus replies, a shepherd leaves the 99 on the mountain to search for the one that went astray, which brings it right back to the parable of the lost sheep, which he talks about earlier. He invites this Samaritan man to go to the synagogue to read the Torah with him. He invites the man to go with his family to go to the synagogue to read the Torah. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. The next morning, when Jesus and the disciples leave, this man is healed of his broken leg miraculously, which reveals that the physical manifestation of that healing of the leg, it reveals to us the healing of the interior heart of his soul. His soul is healed, so therefore physically he is also healed. And Jesus does this a lot in the Gospels. Okay, so I'm going to get to the climax of this episode, and then you can watch the rest of it on YouTube or on the Chosen app. Anyways, I'm going to fast forward to the high point of the episode. It involves Jesus, James, and John being stoned by other Samaritans since they are Jews, and Well, James and John are pretty upset, and Jesus is holding them back, like, don't lift a finger, don't do anything. And once they let the Samaritans leave, James and John turn to Jesus, and they say, like, just say the word and we can rain fire from the heavens upon them, which is in reference to the scriptures where James and John, there's a city that doesn't accept Jesus. And so James and John are like, well, since they didn't accept you, can we rain fire on them? Anyways, Jesus rebukes them. He's like, no, don't do that, and then ends up forgiving them. He then proceeds to give them the nicknames the Sons of Thunder, which the reason why, and we read this too in Scripture, James and John are referred to as Sons of Thunder for their impetuous nature, and they're very, very passionate, but that can also lead them to being very intolerant. As you see there, they get upset over a few people stoning them, and they want to rain fire and hell upon them. So there we go. Remember this. Remember what I said about the thunder and lightning earlier on in the episode where future John is trying to write the gospel? Just think about that for a second. We'll get back to it. So Jesus and his disciples are invited to the synagogue, and Jesus is invited to pick and read a reading from the scroll of Moses. Jesus goes into the Torah ark, which that is what's in the synagogue. It's a Torah ark. It's veiled by a curtain, which is in reference to the Ark of the Covenant being veiled in the Holy of Holies with a curtain as well. Jesus asks for his disciple, John, to enter into the Torah ark with him. And the next part that I'm going to describe is so beautiful, and I will do my best to describe this. And then I will conclude the episode. So, John enters the Torah ark, passing through the curtains, just like how the priest would come through the Holy of Holies to encounter the Lord in the Ark of the Covenant. John does the same, but he is encountering the Lord made flesh, Jesus. He asks John to pick the reading, and John replies how he is not worthy to pick the reading. Now, obviously, John is saying that because of his little stint earlier with wanting to rain fire and lightning from the heavens upon those Samaritans, but Jesus still wants his input and asks if he has a favorite passage. John talks about how he loves the beginning and how God spoke and the world came into being. And they both quote King David, "By the word of the Lord, the heavens were made." John then says how the Greeks use word to describe divine reason. And then we get a little scene transition to future John from the beginning of the episode, continuing with that sentence in which gives the world form and meaning. And then it cuts back to present John and present Jesus speaking. And my interpretation, I believe to be accurate, is that, well, Jesus is God, and so Jesus, God, he's all-knowing, so he sees all time, well, as God, he sees it at once. Now, is that the same with Jesus being both man and divine? Well, I guess we could talk a little bit about that, because Jesus does have a human nature and he does have a divine nature. But anyways, you can definitely contemplate and think that perhaps, Jesus, he already knew of that moment where future John was going to come into this realization while he is talking to present John. Now, Jesus replies how he likes this and that it is a good memory. Not like a memory that we experience, but God's memories, or his experience, really is all at once. Since God is eternal, he experiences all time at once. It's a really, really huge concept. Anyways, the final scene, which is the conclusion, left me in tears, since it's such, oh my goodness, it is such a beautiful scene. We see the Jews and the Samaritans gather in the synagogue, along with that Samaritan family that I mentioned earlier with the man that was healed. And Jesus starts reading Genesis chapter 1. And even though he says it's from the scroll of Moses, but more on that, we know this is Genesis chapter 1. He's reading it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then we cut into future John saying immediately afterwards, in the beginning was the Word. Jesus says, the earth was void without form. Future John says, and the Word was with God. Then Jesus says, and God said, let there be light. And there was light. And so what is happening here is we get to hear John chapter 1 through the eyes of Genesis chapter 1. This, my friends, is scriptural typology, and we get to see scriptural typology in this episode, which is amazing. And as this is happening, there's a beautiful shot of John off to the distance he's in the synagogue, but he's off to the distance, and it's slowly zooming in on him. And as Jesus is reading, there's actually a single tear that falls from John's cheek, and so he's definitely touched deeply when Jesus is reading he's reading the Word. So the Word made flesh is reading the Word. And after that, we get the very final scene of future John back in that same room where he was gathering eyewitness testimony, and he's writing his gospel. And how, he finishes off this little part of chapter 1. In him, being Jesus, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Again, going back earlier to talking about, Jesus saying how the light will always overcome the darkness. We see here that the darkness has not overcome the light, and we reread this in John's gospel. And the very final shot is John looking out the window. Obviously, John is reading this gospel, or like the beginning of this gospel, in a candlelit room, so that implies that there's light in the room. And, there's thunder and lightning that is outside, which is in reference to, again, the sons of thunder earlier. But, I thought about this a little more as well. Jesus does give the name, and this is why this is so deep, and I'll conclude with this. He gives sons of thunder to James and John, obviously John being one of them. But when there is thunder, there's also lightning. And we see that there's lightning even outside in that final scene. Lightning is also light. And so you could say this is a play on words that, Jesus commenting on how James and John are the sons of thunder. Being a son of thunder, you emit lightning. It's lightning. As if he is the son of light. Which earlier on when John says that he is not worthy to pick the reading, Jesus understands this, and he knows this. He knows that, and he even says it in this episode. He knows that all of us are not worthy. But through him and through his inspiration, we then become worthy through him. God became man. He became Jesus to take the punishment of sin to us. And we remember that on Good Friday. But now on this Easter season, we also remember that he, God, as a man, was raised from heaven. He was resurrected. And so if he was resurrected, then we too are also resurrected through him as well. As St. Paul also puts it, if we have been dead by one man's sin, which is Adam's sin, then we are also raised to one life with one man, who is Jesus Christ, our blessed Lord. And this is so beautiful because the light has not, or the darkness has not and will not overcome the light. We know this to be true because of Jesus' resurrection. And there are a lot of us here, myself included, that struggle to believe that sometimes, especially with the times that we are in. But know this, it's not only, and I have to remind myself, it's not only in the worldly perspective, but the eternal perspective. God, when he's talking about how the darkness will not overcome the light, he's talking about this in the eternal perspective. If we stay in God's friendship, we also have the resurrection into new life. We also have eternal life. Now, if only I had more time to talk about this wonderful episode, but if you enjoyed this Easter special, I am more than glad that you did. Please continue to listen and hear. Anyways, more of the episodes that are on my podcast, and obviously you can find it here on Spotify. I also have a YouTube page as well that you can follow, Facebook page, Instagram page, and yeah, I'm going to be trying to pump out as much content as I can during this Easter season, in order to spread the good news in this way. You have been listening to Campfire Catholicism. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Easter season. Take care, and also have yourselves a great Easter Monday, a very great rest of your day, any day that you are listening to this. All right, take care.